Let's get to our next one here. The Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers offseason in 60 seconds. Hired Arthur Smith to be their offensive coordinator. Signed Russell Wilson for $1.2 million because the Broncos are paying his salary. Traded a conditional 6th-round pick for Justin Fields. Traded Deontay Johnson for Dante Jackson. Signed Patrick Queen to a 3-year, $41 million deal with $14 million guaranteed. They could probably move on after this year if they wanted to, but it's a decent chunk of change. Signed Van Jefferson and Deshaun Elliott to modest contracts, both of whom may start for this team. Drafted Troy Fautanu in the 1st round to presumably their right tackle, and Zach Frazier in the 2nd round to kind of add a little bit of youth and a little bit of an injection of youth to this offensive line. That's pretty much it. I don't think I'm really missing anything. Those are the important points.
Those are the good ones.
Blue chip check-in for the Pittsburgh Steelers. How many?
It's fun. The only ones I can think of are on defense, which is just too spot on for this organization. But it's obviously TJ Watt, always in the defensive of the player of the year running. Cam Hayward is like the most unkillable. He's going to be doing this until he's 45, and he'll probably still be one of the most just Iron Man dudes out there.
He had old man strength when he was like 24.
Yes.
So it's going to really endure for him specifically.
Exactly. You don't have to worry about his game aging because it's been aged ever since he walked into the league. So it's perfectly fine. And then obviously Minkah Fitzpatrick. He's just still remains one of the most versatile, smartest safeties in the league.
Yeah, I'd say 3. And you look at kind of good or ascending players. I think Alex Highsmith is underrated. He's really, really good. Joey Porter Jr. is clearly ascending. Very excited about where he can take it in year 2. I like Pickens more than most people. We'll talk about Pickens in a little bit. I like Pickens, but those are probably the 3 I'd say that are like a tier down from those guys, but it's definitely only 3. Glaring holes for you on the Steelers roster. We're going to talk about this probably a couple times, so you can just breeze through these, but if you're looking at the depth chart, where would you start?
Yeah, we'll hit these in some other sections, but to me, it's some of the defensive line depth. Outside of Benton and Hayward, I'm a little skeptical. And then who's playing nickel? Like this is a random person to me, and until they get Sutton back, I just don't know what's going on there.
What are you watching in the first month of the season for the Steelers?
I want to know if Patrick Queen can maintain his level of play outside of Baltimore, because I think there were 2 things that went on with Patrick Queen. Obviously, at the beginning of his career was kind of turbulent. He just was kind of a player who came into the league with his head spinning. Once he got a little bit more time in McDonald's system, and then once they traded for Roquan Smith and put him next to him and kind of let Roquan do a little bit of direction for Patrick Queen on some given plays, especially pre-snap and stuff, I think that really unlocked a player of Queen's athletic abilities to really just go out and play football, play fast, and not really have to think as much as some other linebackers. Now that he is the guy in this linebacker room, and he is kind of supposed to be the leader here, and he's not going to have Roquan Smith next to him. He's kind of jumping into a new defense. I'm just very curious to see if he's able to uphold his level of play, or are we going to get something that's a little bit more inconsistent like we got from him the first few years?
How confident are you in that? What do you think? How do you ultimately think that plays out?
I will give like a 10% boost because it's the Steelers and because it's Tomlin, and I do trust this organization a little bit, but I'm probably only closer to like 40 or 50% that this works out.
What's your biggest concern? Like, why do you think he might not be able to do it? Like, what area in your mind would he potentially struggle in?
I just think they simplified his role so well in Baltimore. I think in coverage, they actually opened it up a little bit to where he did some of the more like playing with, playing in the hook and trying to get him to have eyes behind his head the way that Roquan does. I think he got a little bit better at that. But for the most part, it was a lot of just run and chase to the perimeter. And then even inside the box, he didn't have to do a whole lot of taking on blocks. They kind of gave him the freedom to just shoot a little bit, which maybe they do that in Pittsburgh. But I just think it was such a different role here. Or that he had in Baltimore, that I wonder if expanding the role for him again is going to be a little bit too much on his plate.
I just love that your answer to this question was Patrick Queen when we have no idea who the quarterback is for this team. That's the direction I am going to take this. In the first month of the season, I'm asking and watching who is the quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers and what type of offense is that guy playing in. We talked about this a little bit last week. I think that with Russell Wilson not practicing for a few weeks and Justin Fields looking good in practice, which he had based on conversations with people there, I was running out of reasons why Russell Wilson should be the quarterback for the Steelers. I know that people are going to talk about how bad Justin Fields has been for the last few years. Justin Fields and Russell Wilson had the exact same EPA per dropback last year. The exact same. And I know that Fields he takes more sacks. He finished 31st in sack rate. Wilson finished 27th. Like a lot of their weaknesses are similar in my mind. And with Justin Fields, at least you get an explosive potential element with what he can do with his legs and also what he can do as a thrower. Like it's not nuanced and there are definitely some rough around the edges moments, but he is physically talented. Like there's no way around that. Then we get to last weekend and he puts the ball on the ground twice in a preseason game. And that's the problem here is that even if the ceiling with Fields is higher, and even if the explosive element of what he can give you is really attractive, I think we know what Mike Tomlin is. If Justin Fields is going to put the ball on the ground multiple times in a preseason game, that opens the door for somebody like Russell Wilson stealing this back and being the starter for the Steelers. If you had asked me last week who the week one starter was for Pittsburgh, I would have said Justin Fields. Now, I don't know because I think that is ultimately going to loom very large for Tomlin as he continues to progress here and gets to making a decision.
Yeah, for me, who, my job is not on the line picking who the quarterback is at all. I would like to see Justin Fields. I think he's a lot more fun. I think, like you said, he gives you more explosive plays. Um, but when you're Tomlin, who is, I think if Tomlin thinks the defense is going to be as good as it should be, and he should, he's always done a good job with this unit. They have some of the best players in the league on that side of the ball. They should think that they can be a top 8 unit or something like that. Then yeah, they probably just want stability on offense. And Russell Wilson certainly has his flaws. He's going to take a lot of sacks, but he does have more stability than I think Justin Fields is going to provide. I think he's a little bit more of a consistent processor, even if, again, he has areas of the field that he won't throw and throws that he won't make. His process is more consistent, and I think you know what you're getting on a down to down basis. And Russ is, to a fault at this point in his career, a lot more willing to check the ball down, I think, and a lot more efficient at it than Justin Fields is. And so again, that's not sexy. That might not even be good, but I understand why those might be the things that Tomlin wants to lean on as opposed to a lot of the volatility you're going to get from a guy like Fields.
If it is Fields, I think that there are interesting elements of this. I think it's similar to when Ryan Tannehill went to play with Arthur Smith in Tennessee, where you're a former top 10 pick. Things didn't go right in your previous stop. Tannehill had gotten paid, but it still came to an acrimonious end. He got traded for a 4th-round pick in the same way that Justin Fields did. There's a little bit of being calloused at that stage of your career that I think worked well for both Arthur Smith and Ryan Tannehill in that partnership. And I think that there are some similarities with Justin Fields and where he is right now. And that's part of why I'd like to see this play out, just to have a version of Justin Fields that really doesn't feel like he has the weight of the world on his shoulders the way that he did when he was in Chicago. Other than the quarterback here, some of the things that I'm paying attention to, I think just we just see a ton of 12 and 13 personnel, like based on Arthur Smith's history and the people that they have on this team. Like you have George Pickens, Van Jefferson, and Roman Wilson. There's really no reason that you have to force multiple receivers on the field or more receivers on the field than you want to. And so a combination of Pickens with Pat Freiermuth, Darnell Washington, even Pruitt to an extent, I think we see a lot of that. And then the run game is what I'm most excited to watch. Like not only what the structure is, but who's playing. Like does Fatanu start from day one? When do we get Zach Frazier in there at center? Does Herbig kind of stave him off for a little bit? And then the structure of it. Last year, when in Atlanta, they were built like an outside zone team, but that's not really what Arthur Smith's background is. When they were in Tennessee, it was a lot of duo. When he was with Mike Mularkey, the run game was a lot more diversified. And so if you look at their personnel, I actually think they're set up to do a whole lot of stuff on the ground. And I think ultimately that will be the identity of this team, no matter who's playing quarterback, is how good is this offensive line and in what ways does it come together and how many different things can they do with it?
And I think because everything went so poorly for Arthur Smith last year, it just seemed like things got to the point with him where he was just a little bit too over his head as the head coach. He's still a very good offensive mind, and like you said, his run game stuff dating back to Tennessee or even that first year in Atlanta, especially if he has a quarterback who can be part of the run game, if Justin Fields ends up starting, like this is very much a guy who can put together one of the best run games in the league. And we also have to keep in mind I think what he wants to do in the run game, where it's a lot more physical, a lot more downhill, that's just what the Steelers want to be. That's what they like as an idea. That's what the Steelers want to be. Najee Harris also has the size of a guy like Derrick Henry back in Tennessee. Obviously, they're not one-to-one type of player, but I think he's used to having a back who is that size, who can take that many carries, that sort of deal. So I am pretty bullish on the run game. I'm very glad you brought that up.
Arthur Smith has gotten so much shit over the last 2 years or so.
He's brought it on himself a little bit.
I think that's totally fair. I will say, I was talking to a head coach in the AFC over the last, like, I think it was last week, who is really mad that Arthur Smith is there. Like, the Steelers are on their schedule, and he would have just as soon not had Arthur Smith be the play caller for the Steelers. If Matt Canada wanted to be there for till the end of time, they were happy with that. But Arthur Smith has a very good reputation with coaches around the league who have to play against Arthur Smith. And I think that's important to think about when you consider where this offense was over the last couple years and the fact that they were DOA. They had no shot week in and week out based on who was calling the plays and pulling the levers there. Even if you have reservations about what Smith did in Atlanta, there is an adult offensive coordinator running the Steelers offense now. And I think that we're going to see the difference when you watch this team this year, no matter who's playing quarterback. What is keeping you up at night as you think about the Steelers heading into 2024?
I just don't love the middle of the secondary. Obviously, Minka is incredible, right? And that kind of patches things up a little bit. But I do not know what they're doing at nickel. Obviously, Cam Sutton is going to come back at some point. But for the time being, they have Beanie Bishop Jr., who is technically listed as first on the depth chart, and then Graylin Arnold at the nickel. That is not a good place to be.
Beanie
And
Bishop Jr., I believe, is an undrafted free agent from this year.
yes, yes. Like, that is not a good place to be. And again, we can go back to kind of what we said about the Ravens at a certain point. This is an organization you can give some degree of benefit of the doubt, but man, this is a huge leap of faith. And like you can only give so much of a leap of faith, right? Like, I might be able to say that they might get where this should be the 30th best nickel spot and they can bring it up to 24th. Cool, but I don't know if that like fixes the problem. Like, it will still be a glaring hole when it all comes down to it. So that to me is the biggest concern with this defense.
Yeah, I think you could throw the quarterback out there, and if you have to mention that, considering the questions. But for me, it is the other half of the secondary, like the non-Joey Porter, Minka Fitzpatrick elements of the secondary. What do they get from Dante Jackson? What do they get from Deshaun Elliott? And what do they get from whoever ends up playing the nickel for them? So I think that you and I are both on the same page with that. What are you most excited about watching when it comes to the 2024 Steelers?
I mean, you just brought him up, Joey Porter Jr. That guy is listen, I think we've only done like 5 or 6 episodes, me and you, since the start of this year. Almost every episode I've been able to bring up a corner that just fits into my style, whether it's
So
Carlton
true.
Davis
Your
or just
agenda
guys
is
like
just
that.
so clear from like 10 miles
Yes.
away.
There's a type of corner I love, Charvarius Ward. Just go punch you in the face. Who was one of my favorite corners in the league for the longest time? Prince Amukamara. He was a cornerback too for most of his career, but man, he would not let you live at the line of scrimmage. He was going to make you earn it. Joey Porter Jr. has some of that to him, man. Like, he's very much a guy who is going to put you into the sideline if he can. He's going to make you get off the line of scrimmage very slow because he's just going to grind you down. He's quicksand playing corner, and that's just the type of dude that I love. So I'm all in on him, and I think not even just from obviously he fits into my box of what I like, but I think he just played really well for a rookie corner. Like, it's a hard position to go out there and play against some of the best receivers in the NFL week in and week out. And he obviously had some bad moments. He's an aggressive player, but I think for the most part, he obviously looked like a guy who had Pro Bowl potential to me. Like, I'm very bought in on what Joey Porter Jr. can be.
We don't like talking about Joey Porter Jr. on this show because of the pick that was used to select Joey Porter Jr. in the 2024 or 2023 draft. If Tyreek Stevenson wasn't good, I don't know how I would be able to even watch Joey Porter Jr. The Stevenson thing has helped soften the blow for us Bears fans, considering Joey Porter Jr. was selected with the pick that the Steelers got in the Chase Claypool trade, which it was still like one of the worst moments of my football life over the last 3 years. My thing about what I'm most excited about with the Steelers, what do they look like on both fronts? Like, how good is the offensive and defensive line for this team? I am very excited about what Keanu Benton can look like in year 2. So if Benton is like a difference maker and you drop him in next to Cam Hayward with Highsmith and TJ Watt, that group has a chance to just wreck football games. Even with questions about the depth, that is a chance to be the most dynamic front four on a play-to-play basis in the NFL when it's 3rd and 7. Very excited about watching what that can look like. And how good can the offensive line be? Right? Like, if Fatanu is good from day one, if Broderick Jones takes a step forward, we'll see when we get Zach Frazier in there. I really like Salamalu. Like, I think that he's a really nice piece. And again, if he can be your 3rd or 4th best offensive lineman, you suddenly become a really good unit. So I don't know how quickly it all comes together, considering how young some of the pieces are there. But I think that the upside for that group, especially as a run blocking unit, is extremely high. And then paired with what they can be on defense, I think there's a chance that this team has a consistent advantage in the trenches in most of the games that they play. And that's the type of team that I'm excited to watch.
100%. I want to say quickly too on the offensive line. I just love the idea of what they did in the draft, where they just threw 3 or 4 darts and they were like, "We're gonna figure this out one way or the other."
And McCormick, who they drafted in the 4th round, Mason McCormick, I think he'll be ready to slot in next year. James Daniels, I think, is a free agent. So there is a chance we have 3 to 4 new offensive line starters for this team by 2025. And most of those guys are in their first, second, or third season. That's exciting. Like that is a cool way to build the football team. I think that we've seen teams reap the benefits of approaching it that way. And I think the Steelers might be the next team to potentially do that. Most important supporting character in your mind for the 2024 Steelers, who is it?
It's offensive line adjacent, which is Darnell Washington to me.
Oh, this
You
is
kind of
great.
you brought it up earlier. If this team is going to be in 12 and 13 personnel a lot, they're going to want to run the ball a lot. They're going to want to be downhill. They need their 270-pound tight end who is almost a
270.
tackle.
He wishes he was 270.
Yeah. I'm trying to be nice here.
That is a 300-pound man. I'm telling you right now. I stood next to him a week ago. That is a 300-pound man.
He does actually look bigger now than I think he did coming out of Georgia too.
He's massive.
Yeah,
not in a bad way. He is just a different looking cat. Like that is not an NFL tight end the way that we understand NFL tight ends in the modern era.
And this is the perfect offense to be that kind of guy. An
Correct.
Arthur Smith offense where all your other offensive linemen are trying to punch people in the mouth. That's what your tight end should look like. And especially too, Pat Freiermuth is a great player. I think he's really good, but he is more of a security blanket in the red zone, go up for the ball pass catcher. I don't think he's that good of a blocker. So you kind of need a guy like Darnell Washington who can go lay the wood a little bit and be that type of player. I think he last year and even coming out as a prospect is a little bit more inconsistent in that regard than his
He's
size
more of an
suggests.
idea than he is an actual realized blocking tight end at this stage.
Yes, and the best plays are insane. And he can actually get out onto the perimeter and go make blocks for you. Like he can find targets in space better than a guy his size probably should. But on the down to down, when you're like in line trying to block, it's a little bit more inconsistent than you like. If he can get to just above average with a guy his size and do some of the cool stuff that they can do, I think that could really be like the cherry on top for this run game.
What's interesting to me is you look at the numbers on this. Teams play nickel to 12 personnel now. And that has been the shift we've seen over the last 10 or so years. If you go back to 2014 or so, teams played nickel to 12 personnel with 2 tight ends about 25% of the time. Now teams are playing nickel to 12 personnel about 65% of the time. That's just the new norm. So now if you're an offense, the charge becomes, if teams are going to play nickel to our 2 tight end sets, can we run the ball on them? And for the most part, the answer is no. Like a lot of these teams aren't set up to do that because your second tight end is really just kind of a bigger slot receiver who even against the nickel isn't really doing what you want them to do. The Steelers potentially are the exception to this, where if teams are going to play nickel to their 12 personnel, they are in a spot to just grind you to dust. And then if you're going to play base to it, can we create some matchups in the passing game? So I do think that because of Washington, they're set up to just be a different sort of 12 personnel team than we're used to watching in the modern NFL. And I do think that that creates some potential advantages for them that other teams don't really get to enjoy as currently constructed. Mine was Patrick Queen. I don't think we really need to talk more about this, so I think that's fine. What is success for the 2024 Steelers in your mind?
I think it's twofold. One, just be in the mix, which again, if the defense is going to be a top 8, 10 unit, that alone probably gets them there. And then if the offense just isn't worse than it was last year, I mean, that'll probably get them there because they were in the mix for most of last year. And then the other thing is at least like 2 of these young offensive linemen look really good and look like you have a foundation here, whether it's Broderick Jones, whether it's Troy Fautanu, whether it's Zach Frazier, or even if Mason McCormick has to come off the bench and he ends up playing well, like if at least 2 of these guys can look like real building blocks and maybe the other ones don't look like disasters and they at least look like they have a shot moving forward, that is success. Because this very much felt like a let's set the table type of offseason, especially on offense. If they can get that there, they'll be set.
I think in the mix is the exact right way to put it. I think that's right. And I want us to be talking about this team heading into next spring with a man, if they just get a quarterback, everything else is so set up for them. If that's the tone that we're using with the Steelers after the season is over, independent of what the results look like in 2024, I think that's a success. Your irresponsible player prediction for the 2024 Steelers. This is insane.
This might be my most irresponsible one. I think Najee Harris leads the league in rushing by 200 yards.
Explain this to me. Please justify this for me.
Okay, first of all,
how is he going to lead the league in rushing by 200 yards when Jaylen Warren gets more carries than him?
Because he won't. Arthur Smith wants the big man to run the ball. Look at all of the guys that he's given a ton of carries to, whether it was Tyler Algier.
Yeah, this is Tyler Algier talk. Yeah, that's right.
Yes, he's going to give the big man the ball. And if this young offensive line, there might be some growing pains, but if they can at least be an above average unit, if Darnell Washington can be a useful piece, they're going to get enough volume to Najee Harris. And I think Najee Harris is way better than people think that he is. I think like the fantasy people got really burned about what he is. I think he had that one really bad year in 2022. And people have gotten really down on him. I think he's a very smart runner. I think he's better in space than people realize. He's just not the home run hitter. And that's certainly not going to be part of his game. But I think otherwise he's a really good runner and is going to get a lot of run in this offense.
This is unhinged. I have no idea how to respond to this. The idea that he would lead the league in rushing, period, would be a crazy prediction. The fact that he would do it with some room to spare, I don't even know how to respond to that. Mine is probably just as crazy. I think that George Pickens in this offense earns more than 29% of the Steelers' total targets. That may seem like a totally random number, but this is why I'm using it. Here are the 6 guys in the NFL who earned at least 29% of their team's targets last year. Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, A.J. Brown, CeeDee Lamb, Garrett Wilson, Stephon Diggs. That's it. I think that George Pickens has a chance to see that level of consolidated usage for this offense this year. 1, they don't have any other receivers. Good place to start. 2, I think Arthur Smith learned his lesson a little bit in Atlanta. Trying to get everybody involved, trying to like this guy this time, this guy this time, this guy this time. This offense was at its best when he was force feeding the number one option in his passing game. When A.J. Brown was getting 23, 24% of the Titans' targets a few years ago, that's when this passing game was at its best. And I think all of that stuff kind of converging at the same time, the way their team is constructed and the lessons that Arthur Smith learned in Atlanta, I think leads to a ridiculous amount of work for George Pickens when this team throws the ball. I can't put a total target number on it because there's a chance this team throws it 350 times, but I think he gets a vast majority of the work when they do decide to throw it.
I'm probably not as high on Pickens the player, but everything else you just laid out, I'm all the way there with. Like, who else are they going to throw the ball to? Obviously, Freiermuth is going to get a lot of targets.
I think he has an unrealized ceiling. I really do. I think that there's engagement concerns with the old offense. Like if they can keep him engaged, and I think that feeding him the ball is an avenue to keep him engaged, there is a chance that we see a different version of him this year than we've seen over the last couple of years.
If they can keep him engaged, it's the most wide receiver statement I've probably ever heard in my life.
It's real though. That actually matters.
I mean...